It's my pleasure to introduce the keynote speaker for our 5th annual Feminist Legal Theory Conference, Applied Feminism and Democracy, Senator Barbara Mikulski. Before we begin, let me just briefly describe the format we're going to use here. It's a little unusual, but we think it will be absolutely informative. We're going to have an informal conversation with the senator today. We're going to talk about her background, her role in the Senate, her values, and recent legislation. After our discussion, we hope that there will be time to have the senator answer some of the questions that many of you have already submitted to us. So first, Senator Mikulski, I want to ask you, growing up, did you dream about becoming a U.S. Senator?
Absolutely not. Here. There we go. I think we're now wired.
I think you are wired.
Of course, I'm wired every day. Well, first of all, before I answer that question, Ms. Johnson, I want to thank you and the University of Baltimore for inviting me for this occasion. I understand this is your 5th.
It is our 5th. Thank you so much.
You have a real momentum going. I loved the title, Applied Feminism. That's kind of what we do, some of us do every day. And it's just great being here at the University of Baltimore, where it's growing, it's just expanding in our community, expanding opportunities in the area of business and legal education. And we also want to salute your dean, Dean Higginbottom. Dean Higginbottom is someone that I turn to. His knowledge and understanding of constitutional law is well known and well respected. I've turned to him for advice on those matters, and actually I utilize his expertise along with the other core group of lawyers to help me with my judicial nomination. And I hope in the course of the conversation we could talk about federal judges, since I see an incredible farm team out here, and how that works, the role of a little group that Senator Cardin and I put together. So I'm ready to kind of go and just say thank you and acknowledge the role of your dean and you. You asked about did I think about this? And the answer is no. First of all, in my generation, there were very few of these types of careers that were open for women. The word politics usually meant Baltimore. It usually meant pot-bellied guys who were part of a political machine that made decisions in back rooms, bar rooms, smoke-filled rooms. And I wasn't part of that, nor was my mother and father. My mother and father had a little neighborhood grocery store in our blue-collar neighborhood. We called it Highland Town. Now, many of you who come over there or live over there call it Brewer's Hill, because we had several breweries over there. And my family was more philanthropic. So those were the political bosses. Those were decisions. We weren't part of that. My father, in his little neighborhood grocery store, saw the fact that he wanted to provide good service, honest service to his people, but at the same time, the view that we were all in it together. So if Bethlehem Steel was laying people off, we went on credit. If a family was having a hard time because of illness, my father made sure that they were taken care of. And my mother worked side by side with my father. So I grew up with the values of my father opening that grocery store every single day and saying to his neighbors and his customers, "Good morning, can I help you?" So I was raised with an ethic of service. So we were church people, we were community people, we were involved in that way. But I never thought about politics. I thought about being of service, and I even thought about being a nun.
Okay.
Whoa.
From being a nun to becoming a senator, did those values of service actually prepare you for becoming a senator?
Well, yes, because when I had the good fortune of going to schools like the Institute of Notre Dame, which is also where Nancy D'Alessandro Pelosi went, and also a school that has since merged with the Loyola University. And again, at that time and in our generation, it was a movement called the Christopher Movement. Better to light one little candle than to curse the darkness. And the story goes, there was this very charismatic religious leader, Father Christopher, who led this, and he would encourage young people that no matter who you are, that you've got something to give, and you ought to give it. And he would often have meetings or rallies, or in an environment like this, he would ask that the lights be turned down, and he would light one little candle. And in that darkness, you would see him. And then, Ms. Johnson, I'd like yours. And then we would go out into the audience. And pretty soon, if everybody lit their own individual candle, but we were in it together, we lit up the room. So that was very inspirational to me. The other thing was that they brought in great speakers. That's where I heard Claire Booth Luce. That was a totally different gig in politics. So there was Miss Luce, who was a congresswoman at the time. They brought in people like Dr. Taussig Luttrell, who was a women's surgeon at Hopkins. Dr. Taussig Luttrell was a pediatric cardiologist. Now remember, I'm in college in the 50s, okay? So for a woman to be a doctor was stunning. To be a surgeon was even more awesome. And then to be even specialized in cardiology. But she had pioneered the work in what they called the blue baby operations. It was a whole new methodology in surgery. She revolutionized pediatric cardiology. Children now would be alive today because of it. And as we heard those speakers, they were inspirational, because you just heard what they did and so on. And this is why I can assure you that every woman of the Senate, no matter what our political, because we span a political ideological spectrum, we think that part of our job is to get out there and to talk to people about who we are, what we do, to inspire that next generation of lighting up that candle with whatever gift you can give.
Well, speaking of your women senator colleagues, I wanted to ask you whether or not you find across the spectrum of those women senators, whether they've taken a different path to the Senate, including yourself, from your male colleagues.
The answer is yes. We come to the Senate through different paths. But one of the things I just want to say about us as a group, first of all, some numbers. You saw the numbers in the Dana Bash interview. There are 17 of us. Now, when I came to the Senate in 1986, I was the first Democratic woman elected in her own right. There had been other Democratic women, like Muriel Humphrey, but she had succeeded Hubert. They all succeeded somebody who died. There was a sigh of relief that I was elected in my own right, so I was the first. And when I walked in, it was only Senator Nancy Kassebaum, a wonderful, wonderful colleague and helper. In all of American history, that January of '87 when I took my oath, only 17 women had served. No matter what route you came, Nancy was elected in her own right. Others had been appointed. Now, and so 2 years ago, because we meet at the opening of every session for those power workshops I'll get into, there are now more women, there are the same numbers serving right this minute than served in all of American history. Isn't that
That's remarkable.
Now, many of us most of us come through some type of advocacy. It's not like we started out, oh, I'm going to go to college and major in political science, and I'm going to get into the right law school like the University of Baltimore, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to clerk at that, and ticket punch, ticket punch, ticket punched, and ticket punch. We never saw ourselves as being on a train where we needed our ticket punch. Most of us got into it because of a fight. I got into politics because of the highway fight. Senator Maria Cantwell got into politics because they were going to close a library in her community. Senator Patty Murray was a preschool mom, and when she went to her state legislator in Washington State, they ridiculed her. They made fun of her and said, oh, you're just a mom in tennis shoes. And she walked out of there, just as I walked out of some of those meetings at City Hall, and she laced up her tennis shoes, and she hasn't stopped running ever since. And she ran as, I'm a mom in tennis shoes, and she would show those ads of wingtips size 12 and her little tennis shoes and say, what feet do you want under the table, speaking up for you? So we have very colorful ads, as you might add. And I know Senator Klobuchar's husband teaches here. Senator Amy is just such a great advocate, herself well known in legal circles and in the Senate. So we come because we were fighting. And we got into politics because we were fighters. And each and every one of us, too, along the way, kept hearing no. So you take Kay Bailey Hutchinson, you'll appreciate this. When she graduated from law school, they didn't want her. Nobody wanted her. She couldn't get a job in one of those Texas tall in the saddle kind of law firms there. And I've teased her. I said, maybe that was a lucky break for you. And so she became an anchor woman. She had other careers and other paths that she got there. But the whole idea of being able to be in the law was not welcoming or accepting. And but you know what? And I'm now acting like I'm giving a speech. One of the things, when I was just recently inducted into the Women's Hall of Fame, and it was a great big honor. And all of us who were inducted, as we talked among ourselves, said one of the most important things that we had in common is our biggest successes when people told us no. No, you can't. No, you can't. No, you can't even think, Barbara, about running for city council. No woman had ever won in an ethnic hard-hat neighborhood. Nobody who'd been active in civil rights will ever be supported in this neighborhood. And nobody who isn't backed by the political machine. No, you can't. And I could go through each and every one of those. Kathleen Spitzer, who was the first marathon. No woman's ever going to run in a marathon. No woman's ever. And the minute we walked out of that room, no, you're just a mom in tennis shoes. Every time they said no, deep inside of ourselves, there was a crack. And we could hear the glass ceiling starting to crumble. And we took our no's and turned it into a yes. And that's how many of us got started.
So when you first came to Senate as the only Democratic woman, I'm wondering, what was it like? What was that institution like for you? You mentioned a little bit about, in the video clip with the interview with Dana Bash, about just the battle to wear pants and the battle to create a locker room that was open to women as well. I'm just wondering if you could describe what the environment was like back then.
Well, first of all, I was viewed as a novelty, but my whole generation, because we were often the first, and that was one of the other characteristics of the Women's Hall of Fame. Though many of us were the first, we didn't want to be the only. We didn't want to be the only. And I hope every one of you who's going to be a first at something, that you think not to be the only. So when I came, I'll get into some of the funny stories, but one of the things I want to make clear is that though I was all by myself, I was never alone. Now, why do I say that? Because I had the great guys of the Senate to welcome me. First of all, Paul Sarbanes was my senior senator. What a great guy. I mean, just a phenomenal public servant. And it was Senator Sarbanes that helped me strategize on how to get on important committees. He showed me the formal channels of power within the Senate. But there are these little informal hallways, and Senator Sarbanes helped me do that. So he was enormously helpful. I had two other major mentors. They have the names Bob Byrd and Ted Kennedy. Bob Byrd, because of the way Senator Sarbanes helped me get started, became my mentor on appropriations and on the rules of the Senate, how to use those rules to move for tactical and strategic advantages. And then there was the charismatic and inspirational Teddy Kennedy, who encouraged me also, and I'll talk about some of our significant accomplishments in a few minutes, but also he and Chris Dodd were my pals. Whenever I had a bad day, whenever I had to put up with, stupid sexist jokes, being rebuffed, being dismissed, or whatever, and they weren't, they were episodic, they would take me to La Colleen. They'd say, Barbara, come with us. We'll show you how. And they would take me down La Colleen. They would chat me up. And Senator Kennedy, I know we're on the record, he would drink orange juice with vodka. He said, I don't want anybody to know I'm drinking. I said, it's 7 o'clock at night. Who in the hell drinks orange juice? You're not exactly a fruits and vegetables kind of guy, But that was it. Those men had such camaraderie with me, and they would talk, and they would encourage me, and they say, oh, they're just dumb, whatever. So I felt like I was like a little Rocky, where they were patting me on the back. They'd tell me to spit in the bucket and get right back out there, and they'd have my back. So I tell that because when I say I was by myself, though there was no, in the Democratic caucus, I was not alone. Because, see, this is this whole other thing. As we've moved along as women in politics, it's not about girls versus the boys. It's not about women versus the men. And they really helped me tremendously, each in their own way. Each of those 4 men, but particularly the 3, Sarbanes, Byrd, and Kennedy, as you know, are very different in their style and so on. But I couldn't have had better guys. But when I came, oh, God. First of all, you couldn't go into the gym. But if you saw the gym, you wouldn't want to go into the gym. I mean, it doesn't look like some workout place in Canton, okay? It looks like more out of a 19th century Kafka novel. But it has its own mystique, its own locker room, and its own liniment. And the liniment was the dominant thing. So, and we didn't have our own bathroom. So Senator Kassebaum, because they said, well, we're just not architecturally set up for you. I said, what the hell does that mean? It's the capital of the United States of America. We didn't get our own bathroom close to the Senate floor until 1992, and this incredible wave of women coming because of the terrible Anita Hill debacle. So it was all those little things. And most of all, I think it was people didn't know how to cope with us. Where are we going to be different? Where are we going to make outrageous demands? And if you knew Senator Kassebaum, she is the soul of propriety, enormous dignity, and a fierce fighter in her own way. I have a different style. I was more flamboyant. I was noisier, and I was associated with other noisy senators. But we had to really prove ourselves. And what was really, I think, difficult for Nancy and I, not together, was that because there were only 2 of us, we really couldn't cover all the bases, and we couldn't cover all the committees. And that's the big change now. Every single major committee has a woman on it, or is chaired by a woman. So Anita Hill, if she came now, would never be treated the way she was that awful, horrific period in our history in 1992. There are women on the judiciary, and I must say, I think the men are there in a far more muscular way on our issues as well.
Excellent. Well, in the video, as well as in my remarks, there was a mention of you serving as Dean of the Senate Women. And my understanding is that's for all the women senators across party lines, as you've just talked about your connection and relationship with Senator Nancy Katzenbaum. I'm wondering if you could discuss your role and how that works when new women senators arrive, but also when you take the cadre of women senators you have each year. What sorts of events do you do together, and how do you collectively?
You know, I'm really proud of this. I'm really proud of this. But first, again, by a little bit of background, with the 17 of us, we do not have a caucus. There is no women's caucus in the Senate because we differ on so many issues. So let's take the environment. The oil senators, and they cut across party lines. So Landrieu of Louisiana is closely allied with Kay Bailey of Texas and Lisa Murkowski. So we tease them that they want to drill anywhere all the time. Then there's the green senators and the really, I'd say, very super green, which are, say, Barbara Boxer and Maria Cantwell of Seattle. So we would disagree on that. We disagree on matters of the budget, on tax policy, and even on choice. Some of us are pro-choice, some are not pro-choice, but we're pro-women's health. So we're not a caucus, but we are. How do we define ourselves? We define ourselves as a force. So when we come together, and we don't do it every day, all the time, when we come together as a force, we make things happen. And I'll give some examples on that. So what happens? In 1992, after Anita Hill, it was the year of the woman. Well, I didn't go for that because it made it sound like the year of the caribou, the year of the mushroom. Now it was going to be the year of the woman. Hoorah, hoorah. But that terrible picture of Anita Hill all by herself being harangued by a committee on which there was no woman's presence and no woman's voice, galvanized women all over. There was a substantial number of women who came during the 1992 and shortly after, and they have names well known to you. Olympia Snow, Kay Bailey Hutchinson, as well as the surge of Democratic women. What I had done, I knew that one day that would happen. I just kept all my notes that had come from Paul, Teddy, Bob Byrd, on how do you get started in the Senate, how do you get on the right committees in the Senate, all of those things that a few very good men had taught me, I just kept and organized. So what I do at the beginning, and I was the most senior woman, what I do at the beginning of every term, when there hopefully are new women, I organize a power workshop. And now we come, we get our picture taken, and I have these pictures when you know, that show us this year, you know, there were 2, and then there were 8, and then et cetera. But we run these workshops, and I do about 3 over the course of the first 6 months, about how do you get started in your office, how do you get started in your state, it's really kind of like the mechanics. Where do you and your staff go to learn the rules of the Senate? How do you learn to do these things? So that's where the power workshops come in. But in 1994, and this goes to Gingrich, you might have heard of him. He's always heard of himself. And but became a different mood. It became a different mood. When Bill Clinton came in 92, that's when we had the big surge with the women. In 1994, that's when Democrats lost control. Gingrich got Speaker of the House. Politics as a dynamic began to change then. We had a new Republican woman, Senator Kay Bailey Hutchinson of Texas, and we had worked on an issue or two together. And we said, you know, we need civility in this institution. We need a zone of civility. And if it doesn't start with us, because we were very small in number, even though we'd had a surge, it can't be done. So we conceived of the idea to have dinners once a month. And we had 3 rules: no staff, no memos, no leaks. Okay? What happens with the dinners stays within the dinners. And I will tell you, now particularly with, say, Senator Kay Bailey retiring, my very close friend from the House and the Senate, Senator Olympia Snowe, retiring, that these dinners have stood the test of time. And in that, we have formed relationships. And what has been some of the important things? There have been policy in the way we've acted. So what we say is, even though we disagree and we fight, we argue, whether it's on drilling or even in how we approach equal pay for equal work. I had a bill on the floor. Kay Bailey had a bill on the floor. My amendment passed, et cetera. My bill passed. But at the end of the day would be over. That we could disagree without being disagreeable. That our debates would be marked by intellectual rigor, common courtesy, observing the rules of civility and procedure on the Senate, that whatever it was, we would duke it out, and we would be fierce about it. We wouldn't be dainty, we'd be fierce. But at the end of the day would be over. And we've tried to honor that. And then the other, of course, is just tremendous, tremendous friendships. So we've done that. But then I can talk about the policy in a minute. So for us, it's been to be a force, particularly on women's health, and also to have the zone of civility and the friendships that will come.
Well, it's really just a testament, I think, to all of us about how can, in this age of political discourse that is not always civil, how can we reach out across the aisle or to people who we might disagree with and keep that level of civility as well. It's certainly something we try to instill in our students as they are about to embark on their lawyering career, and professional responsibility and civility is a large part of that discourse. I wanted to ask you, what was the toughest time you've had in the U.S. Senate?
Well, let's talk about policy.
Okay, you want to go to policy first?
Yeah, well, no, it is the toughest time there in that way. First of all, there are 2 votes that I cast that are irrevocable. One is sending troops into harm's way. You can't take that back. It's the only vote that you can't take back. So when we were attacked in 9/11, we, of course, sent troops in harm's way to Afghanistan. What you'll find interesting as lawyers is we did not vote to declare war. We voted to authorize lethal action. Why that distinction? If we had voted to declare war, first of all, the Taliban and the Al-Qaeda is not a nation state. We declare war on a nation state. This was not a nation state. The second and most important in my mind was that it would have negated all the insurance policies. For all those people who died at the World Trade Center or at the Pentagon, if you read life insurance policies, there is no life insurance policy if you die during a war. Okay? So we voted to authorize lethal force, which had the same standing. And I must say, my very dear colleague, Chair of the Judiciary Committee, Senator Pat Leahy, was the leading advocate in drawing that distinction. So that's just an interesting, but you asked about tough times. It came for the vote on going to war in Iraq. So there's the big drumbeat going on. It's got weapons of mass destruction, et cetera, et cetera. And I read all the reports. I'm on the Intelligence Committee. I'm on the committee that funds the Department of Defense. And my question was, should we engage in a preemptive strike? Remember, that was the vote. A preemptive strike on the presumption that he had weapons of mass destruction. I had concluded in my reading of the material that there was no conclusive proof that he had this. And there wasn't even preponderance of evidence that he had it. These are your language, not mine, but I'm using it for today. So when the vote came time for vote, and I thought, I'm going to send men and women essentially on something we think might be there and that he might have the ability to use and might have the intent to use them. So there was a lot of mights. The UN had refused to authorize this. So I stood up on the Senate floor. I was one of 23 who voted against it. I was told it would cost me my political career. I'd look unpatriotic. I'd be the new Jane Fonda, you know, Jeanette Rankin of the Senate. And I said, no, you know, this is the rationale. And in my speech, I said, you know, we do not know how our troops will be greeted. Will they be greeted with a parade as an army of liberation, or will they be greeted with street bombs? Well, you know the rest of the story. So that's the hardest vote. Remember, I can't take it back. The other hardest vote was when we had to vote to impeach a president or decide whether we were going to do it. You remember President Clinton came before us, came before the Senate in impeachment. Now, that is a stunning thing, and again, as lawyers, we have to render impartial justice. That is the oath we take, and we take it 3 times. So when you come in there, we take a group oath to render impartial justice. Then they call your name that you promise and swear in front of the American people that you will render impartial justice. Then you go down in the well of the Senate and you sign a book where you sign an oath that you will do it. So there's no fooling around here. But here's Bill Clinton. I knew Bill Clinton. I knew Hillary. I'd been to the White House. We'd worked on policy. I'd been to parties, etc. And I had to do that. So you know how when you select a jury, do you have any knowledge? I had a lot of knowledge about the Clintons. Okay? A lot of knowledge. And to be called upon to do that, to have such seriousness of purpose, was, I think, there. And I really worked hard. And we don't have the wherewithal, in some ways, to have that. So I had to hire a special lawyer to advise me, because what is high trial and misdemeanor means. Now, let me just say this. I know this is the funny part about this trial. I was given briefings, all of us were given briefings on what does high crime and misdemeanors mean, okay? What does high crime and misdemeanor mean? You all know as lawyers and would-be lawyers, future lawyers, misdemeanor is not a big deal. So here we are getting ready to start the impeachment proceedings. I'm home. I'm reading 300 different historical opinions and legal opinions on what does high crime and misdemeanors mean. And I went back to, you know, the Federalist Papers, etc. I was also catching a very bad cold. And I remember that Sunday night, going to bed so sick with sniffles, sick in my heart that we were going to have to do that. I dreamt in colonial costume. I dreamt. I couldn't get over when I woke up. I had dreamt that I had a bonnet, one of those dresses with prints. And I thought, oh my God, what the hell are we getting into?
That's a great story. Well, continuing with our discussion of policy, obviously you've been in the news recently with the ongoing debate on religious freedom and contraceptive coverage. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about, obviously, the recent amendment that Michelle alluded to in her opening remarks. That was defeated this week, but also, you know, what you think the future might hold as well.
Well, first of all, you know, we can have a robot, and I hope, are we going to have time for questions?
Yes, we will have questions.
First of all, I think all of us in our country cherish the Constitution and the First Amendment, the separation of church and state. And though we talk about the separation of church and state, we don't want church and state to be divided in our country. So we've always tried to have sensitive accommodations to this. When we passed the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known plus or minus as Obamacare, and I'll refer to it in this discussion as Obamacare, we had a series of mandates and so on about an essential benefit package. Now, we were very clear from the beginning that we would ask, as we have in Medicare and Medicaid, that no religious institution nor any religious affiliated institution would have to perform a service that was against their religious doctrine. Notice I'm using the word doctrine. And so that even today, that Mercy Hospital would not be required to perform an abortion. We were very sensitive that also in the Obamacare, that Loyola College or Notre Dame College would not be mandated to give out birth control in their student health clinics. We didn't mandate that. So we mandated that we were very clear that we would not mandate that they would perform a service there. So when Sebelius wrote the rules, or the regs, she gave a 1-year extension to religious institutions to work some of these things out because, again, they're complicated. These debates have been going on from when we were going to give federal funds to Head Start, federal funds for Medicare and Medicaid, where we had to work this out. And we viewed insurances differently. Well, you know the bishop's religious objection based on their doctrine. And remember, they were very clear who they are and what their principles are. President Obama gave them an accommodation that they would not have to pay for the insurance, but insurance would have to provide it to those who would seek that which is covered, remember, in the essential benefit package as determined by the Institute of Medicine. So remember, it wasn't Barbara Mikulski who dreamt this up. It wasn't the gals at, one of our dinners that just wrote this, on the back of a napkin. It was the Institute of Medicine. So we felt that was determined. So then in comes the Blunt Amendment. The Blunt Amendment said any employer or any insurance company for any reason based on religious beliefs or moral convictions can refuse insurance coverage. Well, that is too vague. I'm sure as lawyers you would know, you can't, and by the way, as lawyers you would know, the Blunt Amendment created a new right for federal action. So those insurance companies or employers could sue in federal court and so on. But coming back to the amendment, we said you can't do this. So if you have an employer who says, I oppose drinking, and I'm not going to pay, and you shouldn't drink, and if you do, you're on your own, refuses to pay for any mental health benefit or substance abuse benefit. Let's just say, you say, in my church and the 10 Commandments say, thou shalt not commit adultery. So I will not pay for insurance for any single woman who has a child out of wedlock for maternity and child health. And I also don't believe in a divorce, says the employer, so I won't pay for any health insurance for divorced couples. So if you're divorced, you're not going to get health insurance from my company. So you see, I mean, you go on and on and on about it. So we don't feel that that had the same standing as what the bishop said. The bishops were, we think, accommodated by the Obama flexibility here. And this is why we defeated the Blunt Amendment. But I will say this about the Blunt Amendment. I worked with Senator Blunt on things. See, what happened was a major religious institution in our country took a stand. And it sparked debate on religious freedom and liberty. But we've had these debates before. And they're good. They're healthy. I think they're very healthy because they draw the distinctions. But we don't want the division. But Blunt's amendment was really politics. They hate Obamacare. First of all, they don't like the president. They want to defeat the president. So now they've taken under focus group language around religious liberty. And this is all about dismantling of Obamacare. The Blunt Amendment was not about religious freedom, you see. And I'll tell you what I said in my debate. If you're talking about moral conviction, I have moral conviction that 42 million Americans should not have health. Right now, 42 million Americans do not have health insurance. I have a moral conviction that they should. For me, it's a social justice issue. So I have my moral convictions. They're based on Matthew 5 in the New Testament. They're based on the Beatitudes that say, hunger and thirst after justice, mourn, be poor in spirit, love your neighbor. What happened to love your neighbor? What happened to being your brother's keeper and your sister's keeper? So 42 million Americans without health insurance. A little boy named DeMonte Driver in Prince George's County, in the shadow of the capital of the United States, died of an oral hygiene infection because he didn't have access to dental care. I have a moral conviction that every child in the United States of America should be able to have access to health care. So I have my moral convictions too, and that's why I voted to defeat the Blunt Amendment.
Well, we have a room filled with lawyers,
Oh,
and
boy.
activists, and practitioners, but we also have a room filled with law students. And I'm wondering if you would be willing to share some advice to the young people in the room and the young women in the room as well, just starting out on their life's journey. What do you recommend to them? What advice would you give them? As they are about to graduate from law school, we know, and become lawyers, they have their whole futures ahead of them.
Well, first of all, study hard and pass the bar.
Yes, yes.
You got a lot of tuition bills, even when you have excellent breaks here, so go for that. And then after you pass the bar, come to all the bars in Fells Point, Canton, and Brewers Hill, whatever you call it. So we're very big on bars here. But in all seriousness, some of you will go into a variety of practices. Most of you will go in some form of private practice. But I would hope that as lawyers, that you would also continue to be involved, as Chief Justice Holmes said, in the actions and passions of your time. To follow that where you bring your lawyer skill, where you either earn your living in the public interest, either in government or other fields of public interest, or if you're in the private practice, as traditionally defined, that you do pro bono work, that you are involved in your community. You have tremendous skills. You have a tremendous education and tremendous skills. There are a lot of people who are left out and left behind. So if you're in real estate law, please don't forget St. Ambrose Housing. Don't forget the Community Law Center as we fight predatory lending, because it still goes on. Redlining, sidelining, etc. Or be active in the bar in any other ways. We need you. Be active on boards. Get on those nonprofit boards, whether they're the House of Ruth or making sure that in the area of intellectual disability, that every child does get that special education. So that's my advice. I'll go back to what inspired me, which was my own family. Good morning, can I help you? And also, let's light that candle. Every one of you has a candle, and be the best at what you can in your field and in your family, but don't forget the community, because if we all think that we're all in it together and we all have a way to do it, I think our community is richer for it. And so that's my advice.
All right. Well, thank you. So we asked the law school community, students and faculty and staff, to submit questions ahead of time. And those people who ask the questions are in this room, and I'll acknowledge them, but I'll ask the question, but they'll stand to hear your answer. And so the first question comes from Mike Wilson. There he is in the back. His question is, Bill Clinton suggested you as a running mate for Al Gore during the 2000 election. Could you speak about any noteworthy experiences you had as a potential VP candidate?
Well, first of all, this is why I love Bill Clinton. He had so many good ideas and continues to have them. That was a big rumor out there And I don't know how serious it was. President Clinton really liked me. He felt that for several reasons. Number one was being very close to those blue-collar Democrats that often vote Republican. The other, he said, you're one of the best politicians in the Senate. These are Clinton's words, not mine. You could even be elected for sheriff in Arkansas. And I thought, wow, it doesn't get better than that. And he doesn't even say that to Hillary. And then third, of course, there was the fact that no woman had been nominated and elected. So the stories of, but we weren't in a contest. What often happens, and you'll be interested in the way just about every president does, a vice presidential nominee does, they have a very trusted person who goes around and interviews luminaries. So my view was I took it seriously. It would have been a great honor. I would have loved being Al Gore's running mate. Al Gore and I served in the House. We worked on every piece of legislation that had the word clean on it. We worked together when he was in the Senate in America's space program. We worked together. He is an authorizer, me as the appropriator, on the Mission to Planet Earth initiative. It came from Sally Ride, Dr. Sally Ride, who said, you know, we study the universe, but we don't study the planet where we suspect there might be intelligent life. The Earth. And she said, let's have Mission to Planet Earth, and let's go out there and look back at us and study us as if we were a distant planet. Gore and I took this very seriously, and we created the legislative framework and the financial resources. And right now at the Goddard Space Agency, there is the whole, what we call planetary Earth missions, where we study ourselves as we are a distant planet. And we still are searching for intelligent life, and so on. But out of that has come a lot of our work on climate change. The work has come out that also has been enormously predictive in terms of weather and so on. So I would have loved to have been Al Gore's running mate. And I said, there, you had to leave me and go win a Nobel Prize. But it just was not meant to be. And he picked Joe Lieberman. That all worked out well. Then McCain went on to pick Palin. You can make your own decision about that. But right now, you know, I think being a senator is the greatest job in America. And being vice president, of course, would have been terrific. But what is the job of a United States senator? You know, we take an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The way I interpret this, though, is this, that I have two jobs every day. And my job to be a senator is to think about this. One is the macro, the long-range needs of our country, war and peace. Where is going to be our standing? How are we going to have the research and development for the new ideas, for the new jobs? How do we win not only the Nobel Prizes, but win the markets? So that's the macro. But then there's the macaroni and cheese. And that's where I want to think about the day-to-day needs of my constituents. Policy from the ground up. Listening to what the people say to me when I'm out in the community, when I do these diner tours and all that I like to do, and how do we convert that into national policy? Access to the American dream in being able to own a home. Access to higher education, which you all struggle with every single day, which is not only how to be a good lawyer, but how do you pay to even study to be a good lawyer? And so those are the macaroni and cheese. So though I wasn't the vice president of the United States, I'm a United States senator. And for me, when I hear all this, you're the longest serving, first of all, it sounds like a third party. But for me, it's not how long I've served. And I think it's true of everybody. It's how well you serve. And so for me, every day, I commute every day from Baltimore, okay? And when I go down that Capitol, and I go down when I go down and see the dome, every day I see that dome, I think about my father. I think about the people I represent. It's a thrill every single day to see that dome, to see that flag, and I think about my father, and he opened up that door of his grocery store and said, "Good morning, can I help you?" That's what I think about. I see the dome. I'm coming from Baltimore. I've hit every pothole you've hit, every traffic jam you've encountered, but I'm going to keep staying on that road. So thank you very much.
Great. We want you to stay our senator, so we're happy for that. The next question comes from Rachel Snyder. I think she's also here.
Rachel Snyder was my intern and then a staffer.
Oh, well, that was
Yes.
not disclosed. Excellent. Well,
I hope you're a shill here today. A plant.
okay, well, excellent. She asked an excellent question, so we're happy to have her. The question is, a theme of your co-authored book, 9 and Counting, The Women of the Senate, is that finally having women decision makers in the room helped bring important issues to the table, which the men hadn't even realized were issues. And she's wondering if you could comment on that.
Well, the fact is that we are now on every major committee. In fact, we're even on the minor committees, and many now actually even chair the committees. And they range from Senator Feinstein, who chairs the Intelligence Committee, to Senator Mary Landrieu, with the ranking member Olympia Snowe on small business. And so we feel that what we bring to the table is not only our concentration on the macro, but we insist on the macaroni and cheese issues. So we are trying to concentrate on those day-to-day issues and to make sure that, number one, we're not talking about numbers and statistics. We're talking about people. We're talking about families. We're talking about communities, and to talk about those day-to-day needs. So that's been one of our major focuses. The other's been what we've done on women's health. So when I came to the United States Senate, women weren't even included in the protocols of research at NIH. We were systematically excluded. So I kind of had it after a certain point, and got all kinds of GAO reports, and over the House, my colleagues Pat Schroeder and Olympia Snowe, and we forced that issue. It was Nancy Kassebaum and me, Schroeder, Connie Morella, my good friend, and Olympia Snowe, and we went out to NIH and insisted that all 13 directors of the Institute tell us why, institute by institute by institute, women could not be included in the protocols. So, you know Olympia is a moderate. I know Olympia when she's being immoderate. And the point that I'm making is there was this famous longitudinal study on aging, 25 years, not one woman was included. And I knew they did it at NIA over at Bayview. I said, why weren't women included? They said, you had to come in and the data and so on. We didn't have a restroom. So, what? Okay, 25 years. I said, you know, Strom Thurmond was there at the time. I said, I'm aging differently than Strom Thurmond. So, you see what I mean? This was not, and I still am. So there was the famous study, take an aspirin a day, keep a heart attack away. They did it on 10,000 male medical students. The question was, why didn't you include women? They said there aren't enough women in medical school at the time. So you get the point. So as a result, several things happened. Several things happened. They reevaluated, but also at that time, President Bush the Elder was in the White House. And he gave us Bernadine Healy as the first woman head of NIH, a Republican president, Bernadine, I don't even know what party Bernadine belonged to, nor should we when we appoint good people. And then out of that, we worked with Senator Kennedy. I helped establish the Office of Women's Health at NIH. Bernadine then called me. Dr. Healy said, I want to do a longitudinal study on women. Really, do it. And also look at hormone therapy. Well, the end of the story is this. Working again with Senator Kennedy and Senator Harkin, we got her the money for the longitudinal study. They did the hormonal study. It changed the practice of medicine. And it reduced breast cancer rates in our country by 15%.
Well, we have time for one last question, and this comes from Amy Lazis.
Hi, Amy.
She asks, Senator Mikulski, the state of Maryland is alone in requiring persons subjected to domestic violence, who are primarily women, to meet a very high burden of proof to successfully obtain a civil protective order. Within the last 2 years, there have been several deaths related to domestic violence in Maryland. As an experienced legislator and politician, do you have any advice for those of us who wish to change the state law and make it easier for women to get the protection they need?
Yes, and of course. And the first thing, though, is you study the law. You also have to study power. You have to study power. So the first question that you ask yourself, who has the power? Well, and the second question is, where do you have the best opportunity for moving an agenda? My advice is, take a good look at the Maryland General Assembly. Find those members of the Maryland General Assembly that have a keen interest in this topic, who are already well versed on it. And I'm sure there are, not only the women's group that they have in Annapolis, but I'm sure, again, they're very good guys. The violence against women federal legislation came from Joe Biden, and I was one of his main supporters in that. But it was the Biden legislation. So you find that, and a key legislator will tell you, do you introduce and then develop model legislative language? If not the actual language, though I know you take drafting classes, is the points. And then to see also if you could get it, if that legislature going to leadership can get it in the governor's package, but it's grassroots, grassroots, grassroots. And I believe in moving in concentric circles. Find one who's interested. Find others within the political circle who can. Find then through grassroots organizing, using the best of social media, old-fashioned, contacts, etc., even using a phone, that then you build your coalitions. And also identify where there might be resistance, and also see, for example, do the police department have a hesitancy over this? And then go and talk with them to see what their problems and what their issues are, and so on. So that would be my advice. Now, can I ask you a question about that?
Absolutely.
I understand you do a lot on domestic violence.
I do.
Aren't you considered one of the legal experts on this?
Well, my colleague Lee Goodmark, who's a co-director of the center right here in the front row, and I teach in the family law clinic along with Jennifer Kim, who's over there as well. Many of our students are here, and they do work on legislative matters as well as represent clients in domestic violence proceedings.
Now, I saw that you wrote an article on something about the lethality test.
I did.
And you have some flashing yellow lights about that?
I do. I have some.
What are they?
Well, my concerns are that they may take away women's right to make a choice about how she wants to deal with the violence in her life. So while I'm concerned about the test itself and its makeup and whether or not there's reliable research to support its reliability in determining whether or not someone's going to be killed, I also am worried about the way in which it's implemented towards women without giving them a choice, and then resources are allocated according to the test as well.
Well, I think this is very valid, and this goes to my ongoing discussion earlier about being involved in the community and helping shape policy and shaping the law. So let's go to the lethality test, okay? And I'm going to give a different perspective, acknowledging the validity of yours. So this is why you have a democracy. This is why you got to put all things on the table. This is where you have to have forums for discussion and conversation, and even where there's differences. So some facts. 1 out of 4 police officers killed in the line of duty are killed responding to domestic violence. Because you see, if they're responding to a burglary, they've got their guns drawn, they're ready, but when they knock on that door, they don't know if some poor guy's going off his meds and is doing terrible things, do they have a gun, etc. Okay. The other is that for the police officer, they do not feel skilled and trained in knowing how dangerous it is. They worry that if they walk out and they haven't made the right judgment call, somebody could be further brutalized or even killed. So this is where there was the research and hopefully continual evaluation on evidence-based decision-making. The lethality test was determined. So as the head of the Anne Arundel County Police Department said, this has been an incredible tool. Their police officers are much more comfortable. They're much more listening because it's not, and it will go to the way, not just check the box, because they worry about, their job is to worry about endangerment. And that's how they are. So they like it because they feel they have a tool that is scientific and evidence-based by which they could assess a risk matrix to determine this. So this is where, from their perspective, but you see both perspectives are right. But how can we find then a way that respects choice and informed consent, and yet at the same time make sure that our police officers just don't say, oh, I know he yells at her all the time, or what the hell if he's drunk? I'm just going to leave her and the kids there and call social services. Oh, it's Friday, they can get here by Tuesday. Well, by Tuesday, who knows? Okay, so that's kind of where it is.
Yeah.
But I look forward to reading more of your writing.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, please join me. I'm a little shocked and amazed that you read my piece, so thank you so much for that honor.
Now,
and this is an issue that's so dear to me that I really just appreciate you having that conversation with me.
So to the law students, I did my homework. I was prepared for the questions. And then I had a few of my own.
Yes, you did.
So, well, thank you for this marvelous opportunity. I'm going to thank you for even thinking of me to invite me here today. I hope you've gotten something out of this, and may the force be with us.
I'd like to